and then we'll go on to Matt to understand what a fund of funds does and their role in the ecosystem. Go ahead.
So thanks to be here. So my background is mainly in agriculture, organic agriculture. And at Ecotierra, we work as a project developer since 16 years now. And we used to be, it's easier this way, no? Okay, sorry. So at Ecotierra, we are first of all a project developer. So we design projects with local communities, with cooperatives, and we bring these projects to our own fund, URAPI, to finance the project and develop the project overall. So we invest from land use through value chain up to the final market access. And as I said at the beginning, my background is mainly in agriculture.
Fantastic. Before we move on to Matt, I think it would be helpful for us to understand with URAPI and with Ecotierra, the dual role that you have as project developers and as investors in what we're now calling regenerative projects, but I believe when you started, the term regeneration wasn't really being used, right?
Yeah, we used to talk. So I work in agroforestry and coffee since almost 30 years with co-ops. So we always did the same kind of project. So agroforestry with a mix of native trees, with organic practices. So it used to be called responsible, then sustainable, and now regenerative. So I know it's not exactly the same, but for us, we always did the same approach, no? So Ecotierra, as a project developer, we worked for years for other funds, corporation agencies. So we work a lot to finance the project per project. And we decided maybe in 2017 to create URAPI, to make it easier for us, to create really a financial vehicle to be able to finance the whole pipeline. So now we have both roles. So we are still designing and operating project, but we are also, part of the team is also an asset manager, so managing funds.
So suffice to say that you got a little frustrated that these projects needed financing and you found a way to finance them.
Yeah, exactly. As a project developer, we always needed to change the nature of the project. So, and to go by the trends. So maybe some trends were more about health than gender, and it defense now. So we are always switching from trend to trend. So by creating URAPI, we want to be sure that we can really finance the real projects, our real, let's say, business model, without having to reduce the impacts or reduce our real strategy to something else, no?
Phenomenal. So we have a direct fund financing regenerative projects, particularly in Latin America, I think, with URAPI Fund.
Only Latin America.
So we're going to take one step above, and we're going to hear from Matt to understand, obviously we want to know about you, about Sarona, but also about what does a fund of funds do and its important role in this ecosystem of financing.
Great. Hear me? Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Leroux. I'm one of the partners at Sarona Asset Management, head of finance and operations. So I've spent many years in the background doing all of the accounting work. Very important work. And we're a Canadian impact investment firm focused on private investment in frontier and emerging markets. Sarona's history goes back to META, actually, a Canadian nonprofit. That was established in 1953. One of META's earlier lessons came from working with refugee communities in Paraguay after the Second World War. And it was during this time that META made a $40,000 investment to a Paraguayan dairy farmer named Sarona Dairies. You know where our name comes from now? Yeah. And so many years later, research found that 70% of the Paraguay dairy industry was linked back to that original $40,000 investment. So it's an incredible story. So today we manage US $340 million through our commercial fund-to-fund programs and a mandate with the Australian government, the Australian Development Investment Trust. And that program focuses on gender and climate in Southeast Asia and Pacific. And in addition, we've also recently launched a shared service platform providing back in middle office to first-time fund managers to help them get that institutional background, give them that knowledge, and then help them reach first close and scale. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more? Because I think, if I remember correctly, how many people are investors or finance professionals in this room? We have a few more than we did in the morning. Fantastic, but it's not the majority. We still have entrepreneurs, farmers, ranchers, ecosystem folks. Fantastic. So help us understand why would you have a fund of funds? What role does that play in getting financing to companies in markets like Latin America?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea is just to flow capital down. And fundamentally, our theory is working with local fund managers that are on the ground, have the knowledge, understand the market, understand how to scale the investments, understand the exits. Exits are very, very important and difficult in emerging markets. So they understand that landscape. Sitting in an office in Canada, it's really difficult to understand that. There's a big gap in that knowledge there. And so that's our premise with the global fund-to-fund strategy that we operate in. We operate with the fund-to-fund because it allows us to provide a diversified portfolio, and it helps us provide those commercial risk-adjusted returns that are competitive with the public markets. It can be. And it is an appetite for our investors that they do like that diversification, because if one sector or one market is getting hit hard, maybe some other markets, technology, for example, through COVID, we saw some increases in there. So it provides them that diversified portfolio, and plus the impact as well. Through our funds, we've impacted or invested through 400 companies, and that's through SDGM1 and SDGM2. So it really allows us to spread the impact throughout all of these companies, working through these fund managers and helping them scale the ecosystem. Those fund managers know how to build the ecosystem.
For those that maybe don't know the acronyms, talk about your Fund 1, 2 acronyms.
Thank you. Yeah, Sarona, thank you. Sarona Global Growth Markets Fund 1. That was the first fund, and we have Sarona Global Growth Markets Fund 2.
Yeah.
Very cleverly named, and we're currently in the market with, guessed it, Sarona Global Growth Markets Fund 3. Very, very clever.
We're very innovative in finance. So the idea is you invest in fund managers. So we know you're not investing in Regenera Ventures, but in theory, you invest in finance and fund managers like Etienne, like Laura and myself, who know the markets, know what's happening, know how the companies can exit from the investment. And I don't know if you weren't in the morning conversation, that means making sure that the investors receive their capital back on some level, and with a return. A return, right? So you invest in those managers, but you answer to investors as well. And the value proposition is diversification. For those investors, diversification of risk.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of our investor, we have a broad investor mix. I mean, we do have DFIs in our funds. We have concessional capital in our first fund. Foundations, family offices, high net worth individuals are probably our bigger investor group. And so for them, they want to leave a legacy. And so, the impact is really important for them, as well as the commercial returns, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to just give away funds for impact. And so with the fund of funds, like I said, it is quite global, but it's diversified. We're in, financials, climate, consumer services, technology. So it really is quite broad.
Fantastic. And now I'm going to push you before we jump back to Etienne on regeneration, because I think from my understanding of Sarona, you started out with this general thesis that there's incredible impact in supporting SMEs in emerging markets in particular. And so I think you were focused on that impact, my understanding, first before you went into climate. So talk about your climate mandate and where you're seeing regeneration as being able to be possible or not possible within your next fund, Fund 3.
Yeah, you are right. Regeneration hasn't been, a focus of ours, right? I mean, if I think about it, my perspective or my experience 2 years ago was kind of niche, right? It's becoming more mainstream and more talked about. Closer? Thank you. No worries. And so with our third fund, and I'll talk about the Australian mandate, is that we are focusing more on climate and gender now, or the two lenses that we're really looking at. Speaking with the Australian government mandate, It's a big focus is climate and gender. That is the focus on that in Southeast Asia and Pacific. And so they have a new window coming in that is just solely focused on climate. And so we're seeing a big interest there from the Australian government to create those ecosystems. And the headwinds that we're kind of seeing, especially with Southeast Asia, is that there's rapid economic growth there. We're aware of that. There's high consumption, and there's high energy demands. So there's lots of opportunities there. There are climate risks there that need to be mitigated. So we're seeing an increase in interest with the mitigation and adaptation there. There are some investments that we're looking into that is regenerative, I will say, just in early due diligence. But there are those opportunities coming through and how to, improve the soil for other farmers. So those are I would say that's the direction that we're going. That's the direction that the Australian government and that mandate's going as well, as we're going heavy with the climate and gender.
Climate and gender, and I'll push you a little bit more on regeneration coming up, but I want to jump back to you, Etienne, because I think we just discussed, you were working on regenerating communities and environmental work with productive systems, even, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. So you've now finished investing your first fund, you're raising your second fund. So what's changing, or is there something that you think now all of us are investors in regeneration, as we learned in our morning session. How are you approaching regeneration with Fund 2 that's maybe different or maybe not different because you think you did something quite right in Fund 1?
Yeah, so for sure there's some changes. So in the first fund, we talk a lot about conservation and sustainable forest management plus reforestation with agroforestry. Okay. So now conservation is not really trendy. Okay. It's harder to develop carbon project with conservation strategy like REDD+. So we're not talking a lot specifically about REDD+, but we are talking about landscape approach more globally to be able to include maybe some conservation strategy or components within the project. But the first fund name was Urapi Sustainable Land Use, and the second fund, it's Urapi Sustainable Value Chains. So it's a change because to be able to invest at farm level through co-ops down to the smallholder farmers, so we really need to de-risk the value chain, and I would say keep a hand on the coffee or the cocoa as up as we can, not going up on the value chain. So that's the big change. That's what our investors want us to do. So it's not a real change in the investment strategy, but we focus more on the de-risking component of the value chain, even if we will do the same in the projects. No, it's just marketing stuff.
Yeah, so I want to get into fundraising too, because I think that's part of the big challenge we have with mobilizing capital to regeneration. But you mentioned, I just lost my train of thought. But so let's maybe go into this fundraising challenge that you've had, the change in the marketing and the branding. You're saying you haven't done anything differently, but investors demand certain things of you. So let's start with you on that and say, what's been challenging? Have you been able to use the word regeneration as you raise capital, or what has been the biggest bottleneck to getting investors to fund you so that you can fund the communities and the projects that are making a difference?
Yeah, I think when we talk with a lot of investors at DFI, family offices, foundation, they don't have all the same definition for regenerative. So we still, let's say, stick to organic agriculture, agroforestry, and we prefer to define it. So we'll talk about rebuilding soil fertility, soil covering, native species. So we describe it because we feel like the word may not be enough to be sure that we are well understood. And we present it mostly from the de-risking strategy behind this, because we know that organic agriculture for agroforestry is less risky and more profitable than full sun conventional coffee, let's say, especially on slope like here in Colombia, Peru. So normally we present it from an investment, let's say, perspective to make it understandable. So if you use organic fertilizer and you really rebuild the soil fertility, then you can avoid to put some conventional fertilizer from 1 year, especially the year when the coffee price is very down in the market. So the farmer will not put any fertilizer, And if it's only conventional farming, then the yield will be very low. So as a risk management strategy, it's easier to convince the investor that it's actually a good strategy to be regenerative, instead, let's say, of the poetic or emotional side of the thing, for them.
So we have to change our marketing. We have to say it's a risk mitigation measure, being regenerative. Even so, how's fundraising going?
Oh, it's hard. It's harder than some years ago. Now we are raising the Fund 2, and it's harder than the Fund 1, which is strange. We do have a fairly good result with the Fund 1, fully deployed on 4 projects in Latin America. But yeah, the first fund, we raised it only with private investor, without any blended finance, without DFI, without public money. But now we need DFI, we need public money, we need to build a blended fund, because the private investors are really like waiting to see what will happen in the kind of project we do. So we mix regenerative agriculture at farm level, climate finance, so some carbon credits, and we work with commodities like coffee, cocoa. So in the last year, we faced a lot of, it's a small crisis, now higher prices for coffee and cocoa. We see a lot of changes in the traceability. Organic certification are very challenged by Europe and now the US. And EUDR, the new traceability scheme for Europe, also complicate a lot, let's say, the life of the smallholder farmers to reach the market. So a lot of other projects face big problems. A lot of fund face some write-offs, so disasters. So I will say that the market is really in the defense, not the defense posture right now.
And so maybe we'll jump back to you, Matt, with that. You are looking at funds all the time, but you're also raising from investors. What would it take to invest in these sort of nature-based projects, or these funds and fund managers and nature-based projects? What are some of the biggest barriers you're seeing today?
It's interesting you bring up definitions. We keep, it seems to like these are cycles, right? We've defined impact, we've defined ESG, these conversations keep happening, and there's different understandings of the meaning, right? And you have to go through the learning exercise. It sounds like you're going through that, and that's, if we were to talk regeneration, we would be doing the same thing, right? It is an education exercise, and it's going to continue to happen. It'll just be another term probably in a few more years. But with fundraising, I would agree, it is just difficult, and I think you're hearing that across the globe with small fund managers, larger scale fund managers. I will say for us, emerging markets, the perceived risk with emerging markets, right, is still there. You add fund-to-fund structure to that. We're doubling up on that from the investor base, because now they're thinking about fees on fees, and now emerging markets, right? I'm going to have lower returns, or the commercial returns, right? So there's a couple hurdles that we face with our fundraising efforts. When I think about regenerative investing, what comes to mind is exotic structures. I think that's what people think of, these complex structures and technologies. And where that could be as a perceived risk for investors at all different, whether it's high net worth foundations, is slow adoption, right? And a longer hold period with that. And LPs, they want liquidity options. They don't want capital locked in necessarily 12, 15 years, right? Which could be the perception, right? That I would say. And so too, with this, I would say, newer niche market, what comes up is are these companies, fund managers, institutionally ready platforms, right? Are they first-time fund managers? There's execution risk with what comes with that, not having the track record, not having the governance in place, not having that disciplined portfolio, right? And so those are perceived risks when you're starting to have these conversations with, could be high net worth individuals, but some of these foundations. And so what's a mitigant to this is blended finance solutions. And you might hear this from me a lot today, because I truly believe, and that is the best way to mitigate the risk and crowd in more private capital. Whether it's going direct into the companies, into the fund managers that can build these ecosystems locally, but having first loss capital, concessional capital, even technical assistance support. The Australian mandate has a rather large funding for technical assistance to help build that capacity with the fund managers and with the companies themselves, whether that's building ESG policy, training, gender lens. It really helps to build that institutional background for these new fund managers.
And maybe just some definitions, if we don't have finance folks in the room. LPs are?
Limited partners.
Okay. And just the holding periods that we're talking about, longer time horizons.
Yeah.
Investors, how long?
How long their capital's locked up, essentially. I make an investment on day one, I get it back in 10 years. That's the lockup period that's held up.
And investors, when they invest in your fund, are investing for at least 10 years.
Yeah. Our commercial platform is a 10-year platform. And maybe just to go into the fundraising difficulty that we're experiencing from our level, it's coming from multiple avenues. I mean, DFIs, mandates have changed. We're all aware of.
Yeah, DFI.
Yeah, development finance institutions. So USDFC, FinDev are examples of that. And so, with the US, there has been change in mandates. And then with our high net worth individuals, we do face an aging population. They can't no longer lock in for 10, 12 years, right? And not necessarily is that generational wealth change happening as well. So that's one of the hurdles that we have. I think the impact thesis is still there, the want is still there, but it's just those lockup period. And that just goes back to my point about, finding these liquidity options for LPs. A 10-year period is quite long. And so if you start to think of regeneration, the thought is, well, this might be longer. Am I giving up returns for this as well, right? And that's, for us, from a commercial mandate perspective, that's a challenging conversation.
And maybe going back to our session in the morning, we talked about fiduciary duty. We discussed that and so you have a duty, and basically your investors are also demanding certain returns, yep. Correct? What does that look like, and where does that pressure sit for you when you start to look at something that's really impactful, but maybe you can't see the returns to be able to justify the investment versus that conflict with fiduciary duty that your investors are? Yeah.
We've talked about this for many years, and we do say it's returns first and impact, right? They do go hand in hand, but there was this notion of impact first and then returns second, right? And so it is returns first and impact. There are a lot of opportunities that we review, and for the most part, as we're market mapping and looking at these opportunities, we're mostly working now. We've learned a lot through our 16-year history, and we're working with fund managers that are experienced. They're in their second or third funds, so they've got that pedigree, they've got that proven track record. So that actually almost mitigates that risk or concern for our investors, right? And we also come in more so on the later stage of the fund managers fundraising. So usually it's final close, maybe the close right before. And the reason is because that reduces the blind pool risk. And what's blind pool risk? At the point that we come in, I'll say 50, 60% is committed already. So we know the investment's already. So we're reducing that risk as well. And again, it all has to have an impact thesis, no matter what. But again, we're just working with more experienced managers rather than the first-time fund managers.
Okay, so I think we are starting to unlock what would we have to do to kind of change financial perspectives, commercial financial perspectives on regeneration, right? So we need success stories. We need to be able to demonstrate the holding periods, or the time of the fund is still 10 years is still long for some people. I think that's really interesting from a regenerator's perspective, because in regeneration we work in millennia. We work in centuries, and so there's a mismatch in timelines. And I don't know if we'll be able to completely overcome that, but I think we'll dive into the blended finance conversation. But maybe going back to this, your fund I think has a holding period of 15 years. How were you able to convince investors to invest in long-term regeneration to make that happen? And yeah, what are they saying about their work in your first fund and going to fund two?
Yeah, I think 6-7 years ago, it was easier to talk about 15 years than now. For the second fund, we're talking about 12, maybe 10, and some of our investors who invest in the first fund can only do 8 years now. So that's a big game changer, because if you do agroforestry, you really need, I would say, 10, 12 years to really be able to see the results. Even if we only do like greenfield, so startup, new businesses from scratch, or we invest in quite new businesses, no? So we also need time, no? It's agriculture, so if we get late a little bit in something, we'll lose a full year, no? A full season. So 10 years is not that long, no? But it's, for now, even the DFI, even pension funds, so they talk about 10, 12 as a maximum. That's our experience right now.
Okay. How are we doing on time? I just want to make sure that we're still finishing at the hour mark.
Yeah, 30.
Yep.
Time right there.
Okay, perfect. Because I want to jump into maybe the blended finance question. And my goal here is for you also to understand the reality of people who, in particular, Etienne, you're financing agroforestry systems in Latin America. So the challenges that those intermediaries, because really at the end of the day, they're financing intermediaries, the challenges they have to be able to deploy capital. But we also talked about changing paradigms, so I'm sure we'll have questions in the room on how we can change our paradigms. But before we jump into that, we have structural barriers: time, returns, experience of first-time fund managers, and I don't think we have a lot of fund managers in Regeneration with proven results. Invest in Urapi too, please. So what are, I think you've already answered this question a little bit, Matt, but what are the ways that you've seen certain actors being really catalytic to overcome those barriers?
Yes. And I will sound like a broken record. It is these blended finance structures. You know, when we're getting the development finance institutions, the DFIs in, that attracts a lot of private capital. We actually, a few years ago, we went to all of our investors and sent out a survey. It's really important to get their feedback. And we asked them, how impactful was it having DFI in there? How impactful was it having concessionary capital in our first fund? And it was quite unanimous that it was an important factor in their decision-making to come into the funds. Again, the perceived risk, right? It de-risked the portfolio for them, right? They know that they were safeguarded with the concessional capital. So just an FYI, Global Affairs Canada provided concessional capital into our first fund, which was instrumental to get that fund off the ground. And then we had US DFC come in as well, into the first fund as well. And then DFC came into the second fund as well. So I think, you know, as we look forward and the difficulty with fundraising, it's almost a call for change, right? We've got to get more of these government agencies involved to provide the first loss concessional capital to really catalyze public or private capital. And then also there's other buckets too, which is technical assistance. Global Affairs Canada has been creating quite a bit of buckets, I'll say, of capital for technical assistance. And we're seeing an increase in that and the impact that has on building these ecosystems. And these fund managers, I already went into details about how it can help. But we're seeing more and more requests for these technical assistance. And the way that we can also help with that is obviously partnerships are very, very important. We have partners with 2X Global. And the way we can help there is helping with shared services as well. So these first-time fund managers that can't really, you know, afford this, the technical assistance can help support that as well. So there's different aspects that we're looking at on how do we build the capacity with these fund managers and how do we build those ecosystems.
Do you want to add to that in terms of your first fund was not blended, but you're looking at having to blend fund too? I think it's an interesting trend. It's now people are becoming more risk averse and it's becoming more difficult and we're doing shorter time horizons. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so exactly. The second fund will be a blended fund. The first fund, we did it only with private investor. And now it's needed because I think a private investor expected. So they want us to have first loss or concessional tranche on the debt side we will develop within the fund. And yeah, it's not easy because we talk with DFI, they look at the model, and at the end they confirm an interest, but for the market tranche. So for the market part of the debt the fund. So that our expectation is to have the DFI accepting to take the concession loan. So to, yeah, what's concession?
Do you have a question? Okay. Okay.
Oh, no, that's all.
Actually, I was just going to open this up to questions for the last part of it. So, Laura, do you want to kick us off?
Hi, Etienne. Would you please walk us through an example of one of your investments and like make it land for everyone? Like, where are you investing now? Like, what went well, what didn't? Maybe so that the entrepreneurs know like what kind of examples that you guys develop and invest in, and if you have any tips for the people that want to connect to you right now for you to invest in them.
Okay, so what we do. So normally we connect with communities, with co-ops mainly, or SMEs, but very, very well attached, not to a region, to a landscape. And we talk with them, we organize some workshop with them, and we develop with them an investable case, a business case. And this may take 1 year, 1.5 years, but really, we really develop the project. So we're not expecting to receive an investment proposal. We're not designed to do that. We're designed for our investor put money in our fund because they want us to act like a distributor, to develop a pipeline, not to receive a pipeline, because most of our investors also do project directly. So they want us to create new pipeline, which is not very difficult for us, so we don't have a problem to find pipeline. But after that, the project, they're always built the same way. So we have 3 components. The first one will be debt component to loan money, develop loans down to cooperatives or collective organization, and we support this organization to develop microcredit component down to the farmer. So with this money, we'll finance the transition from a non-regenerative or unsustainable way to manage the farm to a regenerative way to manage the farm. So mainly agroforestry, maybe we'll put some trees on full sun coffee or full sun cocoa. We'll move from conventional agriculture to organic agriculture, things like that. And then we invest, I will say, most of the money in the de-risking component, which is the value chain component. So we create with the communities new private companies to really de-risk and strengthen the value chain. So we'll sell services, products. So we build mills, coffee mills. We build wet mills, dry mills for coffee, for cocoa. We build organic fertilizer plant to produce compost on a large scale, things like that. We also develop a road-to-market strategy. We develop a marketing teams to really sell the coffee, the cocoa up the market. And the third component will be carbon finance. So we attach carbon project, mainly AR carbon project or REDD+ carbon project, to what we do at farm level. So doing this, we generate a new inflow of money by selling the carbon credits. So we can use these flows of money plus the value chain component to de-risk our investment at farm level. Because without these de-risking component, it will be impossible to really lend money down to the farmer at, let's say, acceptable risk level for most of the investors.
And just quickly, what are you looking for in projects so when people come up to you, they know they're a fit?
No, we only invest in LATAM, so Mexico down. We look at a lot of projects in Mexico right now. We have good ideas in Peru, Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala. But we're still looking for 4 ideas. Sadly, to be able to align with the market, we need to deploy big money. Big money, I think, for this kind of projects or ticket size. So the amount we need to put in the project, it's like 15 million US. And that's to be able to really reach the biggest investor. We cannot do 500,000 per project, but we can group projects. So normally we work with 10, maybe 15 co-ops, 3,000 farmers within the same project. And most of the time, we start just with one co-op. So we start designing the idea with one co-op, one community, and then we bring others in. And the project start, maybe a co-op wanted to have a warehouse and some harvest capital, and we develop it to a full 7 million US mill with access to market, trucks, and so we reached the 15 million. So we're very good to spend money in projects. No, but we need to be very creative. So first for us will be the promoters of projects, our partners. We don't really care about financial statement. So the most important part is the idea and the business idea. So a good business idea, it's doable. But if someone come and trying to convince us that it's important to plant trees to save some birds, I mean, I agree, but nobody will invest on that. We need to show, maybe philanthropic money, but we need to show the business case behind the project to be able to sell the idea to save birds. So that's what we do. We want to be sure that we'll be able to find where's the money, where we can generate plus value, where we can make our investor, our LPs, earn money and be happy. Because as Matt said, first of all, they want the returns. After that, they want the impact. They want both. But if there's no return, no need to talk with them. So they want the return. So we need to really show the quality of the business case. And after that, we can talk a lot about impact. No? So that will be my first question. What are you doing? How can you generate more value from that? How can we scale it? Maybe we can move from 100 hectares to 2,000 hectares, working with neighbors, working with others, collective organization of your communities. So this kind of really great talk we can have together. So we don't need to receive a proposal with, let's say, term sheet and things like that. It's boring. Just left it for after. So let's talk about the idea and the business case.
Just thinking, it's a good point that you bring up. I was thinking about, some lessons or risks, and with some of the investments that we've come across our desks, and it's don't lead with just impact, right? Don't just start that. There needs to be a scalable business model, and that's what to start with, and then the impact afterwards. So, just to relate what you were saying there.
And maybe just quickly what you're sort of been looking for in fund managers, and I want to open us up to maybe one or two more questions, but just going off of that, since we're talking a bit more about the investment thesis.
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
What you're looking for in fund managers and investment potential.
Yeah. I'm probably going to say the same thing here, and it's those experienced fund managers. Again, that is, through our 16 years, we have learned some valuable lessons. One is the difficulty of working with first-time fund managers, especially in a commercial platform that we have, right? They don't have the track record, don't have that institutional background, right? Which is the governance, the reporting, the impact, etc. And so how do we combat that? Well, we have very extensive due diligence processes, right? And then we also work with them to make them better fund managers as well. That's one of the lessons learned. The second, another lesson would be mixed strategies. That is just a complex, and it's not going to generate returns. And what I mean by mixed strategy is having a portion of the fund that has venture capital, but then late stage private equity, or having an impact first investment, but then a focus on financial in that same portfolio. Those are conflicting ideas. It's not going to generate the returns, right? And we have seen that in the past, and we've experienced that in the past as well. And third, I would say is currency. That is something that is, our first fund, vintage 2010, we went through those currency swings, and the portfolio was hit pretty hard. And when we're looking in emerging markets, there are hedging strategies, not necessarily always available for the companies, but they're also expensive. So we look at opportunities that have natural hedging in it. So the revenues, are hard currency, supply chain is local. And then the last one is exit strategies. I know I came with that. And this is coming back to the experience of fund managers, but I'm pretty sure we can all agree that the exit routes in emerging markets isn't like developed nations, right? And it requires a lot of thought, but early stage thought as well, to understand what is the exit strategy for this particular investment, right? Even at the time when we're coming into it, we want to understand that when we're in the due diligence. Who are the parties involved? What's the market like? And a really good fund manager will have that capability. They understand the local market, and they'll also start to find some secondary buyers as well, just to start to drive that exit market, because it is quite difficult. Say, when we're talking about the managers that we're looking for, it's that experience and that pedigree.
Fantastic. I know we're almost at time, but I would love one or two more questions before we do last conclusions. I think we had the first hand here, and then we'll go here.
Thank you so much for your thoughts and experiences. My question is about maybe how do you regenerate governance within the fund? You know, probably through your investments, you have this impact, regenerative impact, but how are you applying those values and that philosophy of regeneration inside the fund?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And for us, it may be our biggest risk as we work with communities, sometimes thousands of farmers, co-ops, and the cooperatives, especially in Peru and Honduras, they are facing. So they're very, very weak, I will say, on the governance side. So we need to put resources to strengthen the governance. And that's something our investors don't know. They never ask about it. They don't really understand this risk, the social risk or governance risk. So they're not, I would say that they don't want to pay for it, to mitigate it. So we do have like one or two individuals per project working on the governance with the communities, with the co-ops, but we need to take this cost directly from the project revenues, and we still need to produce the RR, that's for the return that the investors are expecting. So best answer will be maybe to work with the TAF, the Technical Assistance Facility. So Technical Assistance Facility, when we talk with some of them, that's free money, grant money for project, and we always ask for technical assistance at farm level or governance, mainly governance. But even the TAF don't want to pay a lot for governance. So they want to pay for legal structure, they want no value added. We need governance or farm level.
Yeah, and just maybe from our experience, I would say we really started to invest into the climate, not from an investment dollars perspective, but into our due diligence processes and embedding climate and gender into our due diligence processes. And now, when we're completing our due diligence, we rate the fund managers. We have a scorecard on gender, on climate, and then we also want to understand. We're not looking for perfection. That's not what we're looking for, right? But we're looking for openness to learn, right? Because we do work with our fund managers very, very closely. And as we were talking about, the technical assistance is such a huge piece with the Australian government alone. And so the idea that when we're coming into these investments is we understand where they are at now, and then we help them lay the groundwork of how they're going to improve their governance, how they're going to improve their ESG policy, their climate policies. And that's really important for our due diligence platforms, is we want to work with fund managers that are open to grow.
Hi, I've recently started a venture that seeks to build an additional income source for regenerative farmers and ranchers by measuring the additional water infiltration on their soils that they've managed to achieve, and turning that into a form of unit that just represent hydrological recovery. And the idea would be to then sell those as units, not as like water right purchases, but just as certificates of recovery to companies with heavy water usage, to build an income source to help scale that. Would an idea like that, at least conceptually, increase the likelihood of you investing in a large ranch or like network of ranches that were like signed into a program like that?
Yeah. I mean, carbon is not our biggest inflow of money in the project, so we're mainly, let's say, coffee, cocoa. Our investors are not carbon ready, so a lot of them do not understand how the carbon credits works, and they still see the carbon credits as very risky because there's a lot of changes in the regulation, a lot of countries who are not doing what they are supposed to do by the year they're supposed to do it. So that's problematic. So we haven't talked yet with them about biodiversity credits or water credits. So I don't know. For us, it will be great as an indicator, for sure. It will convince DFI or other kind of investor for sure. But I think they will just remove the money coming from these units from the business case, to be totally honest. So the project will need to be able to be profitable without it. You will see it as an upside.
Yeah, an additional revenue stream. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we discussed carbon a bit in our preparation. Any perspective from Sarona around carbon or monetization of ecosystem services?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We're not participating in carbon credits. That's an interesting concept that he came up, and I just see it as an additional revenue stream, right? There are actually, interestingly, some partners that we've been talking to that are getting into ITC credits for climate adaptation in certain markets. And what they're talking about is actually selling those carbon credits as well as an additional revenue stream. So we're actually starting to see this as an additional to boost returns potentially for investors. And so we're not into it yet, but there are some interesting discussions that we're having, and hearing from you from a biodiversity water, I'm like, oh, that's
for sure.
Creative ideas. Like I love.
It's a very good idea.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think, to convince some investor. But in our experience, a lot of time they just remove this line from the financial model.
Yeah.
And the project must be interesting without it. No?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It must be sustainable without that. I agree. Yeah. Sorry.
Which also presents, I think, a challenge, because those carbon markets are there in theory to help subsidize the model to make it possible. So there's a challenge. Maybe one question back here. We have a little more time than I thought, and then I would love to go through some closing thoughts for blended finance from Matt and Etienne.
If you could provide some examples of the type of metrics, indicators on the environmental side that you report or that your investor requests to you, what are the most common, or probably if you use international standards, which standards?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we use indicators from IFC, and we do monitor a lot the number of tree planted. That's the DFI love it. So tree planted, hectares sustainably managed, which we need to define very well because it's changing a lot from a fund to another fund. Hectare under conservation, hectare reforested. And obviously, in our case, the carbon credit. So capture or avoid emission. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, just going to go a step back because then I'll answer your question. But as I said, we work with our fund managers, right? We want to make them better impact investors. And one of the ways that we've been doing it is we release an annual benchmarking report to all of our GPs, so all of our local fund managers that we partner with. And what that does is we gather all of this impact data. We have so much impact data that we have, and we rate them against their peers. And so that they get an understanding of where they stand. And we rate them against 2X criteria, let's say. And so we give them quite in-depth reports. So every fund manager gets this report that highlights all of these criteria. And we also give them tips on how to improve, where we're seeing shortfalls and where they can improve as well. And so that's, from ESG policies, women in management positions, let's just say, greater workplace policies. So we give them this, I think it's a 10, 12-page report that just outlines this. And we've seen a change throughout the past few years as we've initiated this benchmarking report. So there's quite a bit that we're reporting. I mean, a lot of the time, data flows up, and then that's it. So what we're trying to do is do the opposite and flow it back down to make them better impact investors.
Fantastic. And so maybe just to close out, this is the education day. And then we have 2 days of conference learning from our peers, understanding what's going on in the regeneration ecosystem. We talked a lot about some structural barriers today. time horizons, return expectations, definition problems. So I would say, and we talked a little bit about solutions. We're blending our funds now. That's an important solution. We didn't really get into depth about, I think, your success versus some of your peers, and your solution is actually within regeneration itself, partnering with the local communities and mitigating the risk of climate and other disasters through regenerative agriculture, agroforestry systems. We do have a public panel or a public finance panel later on in the conference. And so for those that can and do have the option for working in this ecosystem through blended finance, so speaking to DFIs, there are a couple of foundations in here. What would you say is the single most important thing that they can do or learn about regeneration and blended finance that would help catalyze the system and move it forward?
I can start just from the fund-to-fund perspective. I think it's just fundamentally the impact that can be made, right? Even from an anchor investment, from concessional, first loss, the amount that the private capital can be brought in from that, right? This is how we scale these markets. This is how we create these ecosystems, right? This is how we create meaningful and lasting impact. You know, it is becoming harder and harder to fundraise. It is harder to come across from private, from all different sectors. And so there is really a need. So it's almost a call for action, right? To have these types of conversations within the ecosystem, you know, in this type of forum, to get that conversation going with local governments, right? To really get that coming in. I think that would be my lasting message, is just really have these types of conversations. It's so important. It is a call for action to get these blended finance solutions, because I think they are needed. The portfolios need to be de-risked from private capital. And we're kind of seeing private capital stay more domestic right now in our experience, right, in Canada. I mean, the way the world is right now, that's where a lot of capital is staying. And so when we, like I said, when we start to talk about emerging markets, you know, there's a little bit of hesitation. We talk about fund-to-fund, you know, fees on fees. So these types of structures can really open up the doors for that. And then it exposes these investors to this market. And then again, you start to go forward to institutional capital. You know, performance drives those decisions. You know, we have to prove that emerging markets can perform well, can provide commercial returns. How do you do that? It's starting to create that interest into it, and that's where blended finance solutions can come. So it just starts to scale this idea.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I have two questions. One is almost asking for permission to challenge a little bit what you've been going towards, because I love the idea that Etienne brought about creativity, and what you're saying, Matt, now about really pushing the envelope a little bit to actually go beyond the restraints that you are facing in fundraising. And so I hold the idea that creative energy means generating new patterns. So what would it take to actually generate a new pattern in financing that serves the role that it can serve in transforming the way we do economics in this world?
Want to start again?
An easy question, but no, I think at the end, in our case, our investor invests first in us, no? So in person. So I think they will invest first in our ideas, our personalities, our capacity to react when our plan will not work, because they never work, basically. So that's true for all of us. So basically, I think no need to be ashamed of our ideas. We need to be very creative, because especially now, it's hard to fundraise because a lot of investors think that our model do not work. So we need to show difference. No? We need to show new ideas. We need to talk about new things to convince them. No? So yeah, I think it's the best option. It's to be creative right now and to be positive. No? There's a lot of money there. No? A lot of investors have a lot of money, but they're just not investing. No? So yeah, I think we need to be very creative.
And just to add, I mean, you have a great perspective. This is why you work with local partners, right? That understand the markets. You know, for us, we look at partnerships are really important, right? And we're talking about these creative solutions, bespoke solutions, right? We're hearing a lot of this in the market where it is common. Fundraising is difficult, and so we're starting to hear other fund managers going, well, we might pause our fundraising and start shifting to these more creative solutions, maybe focused mandates or something like that. And what I'm also seeing is that there is this collaboration of minds and ideas. You know, the strengths of two firms coming together, right? That then can really create a platform that is interesting to these investors, right? Whether it's high net worth, institutional, whatever it might be, right? And so we're starting to see this dialogue more in the industry of like-minded individuals coming together to create a stronger thesis and a stronger platform that will hopefully attract institutional capital, private, you know, all commercial capital.
So maybe if I was to say, in the meantime, before we are able to change the paradigms of commercial and institutional capital, which is something we're working towards, right? I think RIA is helping to change the hearts and minds of investors. Yeah, we have ways that we can start to work together in community and show traction, track record. You have a first first successful fund. How do we raise this story up? And maybe just your closing thoughts, since we're at closing time on you know, where we go from here.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not very well known, I think, in the world, especially in Canada. But yeah, we need track record. We need experience to be able to fundraise. We are very open to any collaboration, so that's our model. I want to partner with communities, partner with other lenders, other financial institutions. And I think it's very needed right now, no? Because we need to show, especially to the DFI, to the biggest investor, that it can work. And it works by working all together, no? And we need to keep it simple. They don't want to know, they don't want to hear a lot about the technical stuff, the complexity of it. We need to keep it simple and to show that it can work, so basically, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Etienne. Thank you, Matt, for this wonderful conversation. And they're here at least for the next day or so. So if you want to continue the conversation, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bueno, ¿cómo vamos? Mientras les toman la foto a los panelistas. ¿Cómo se sienten? ¿Cómo va este día? Vamos a tener como último bloque del día educativo, vamos a tener el nivel avanzado de finanzas regenerativas en este salón, y de ganadería regenerativa va a estar en el salón Quimbaya, que es en el primer piso. Entonces, si alguien está interesado en esa sesión, es el momento de movernos. Hoy hemos tenido un recorrido muy interesante. Empezamos esta mañana con Edward y con Melina, quienes nos dieron la inspiración para el resto del día. Luego tuvimos emprendimientos, luego tuvimos una charla de finanzas, pero también con una visión muy de fund manager que fue muy ilustrativa de cómo llevar esto a conectar con el capital. Y acabamos de oír a dos inversionistas. Entonces creo que hemos pasado por todo el espectro de los actores alrededor de la regeneración. Así que estamos preparados para nuestro último bloque. Para este último bloque tengo dos personas increíbles, entonces necesito que me oigan, porque si no, no puedo empezar. Vale, vamos a invitar al escenario a Ernesto Van Peborgh.
Él es emprendedor, ingeniero y pensador sistémico, con un MBA de Harvard, pionero en naturaleza y finanza y diseño regenerativo. Trabaja para reconciliar economía, tecnología y ecología a partir de los principios de los sistemas vivos. Tras más de 20 años en banca de inversión y private equity, dejó las finanzas tradicionales para fundar Seva, Living Capital, donde impulsa marcos para medir y certificar la vitalidad, el aliveness, de ecosistemas y desarrollos biohubs, como nodos de regeneración territorial. Además, es autor de varios libros, columnista de La Nación y conferencista en varios espacios de TED Talk. Así que, Ernesto, bienvenido, es un gusto tenerte acá. Y en el escenario te va a acompañar en la segunda parte de la sesión Laura, así que vamos a estar en una sesión muy emocionante.
Muchas gracias. ¿Quién acá practica yoga? Levante la mano. Bueno, vamos a cambiar un poco la energía. Estamos a la hora de la siesta. Vamos a hacer 3 ohms. Yo voy a hacer uno primero y después ustedes hacen una gran inspiración y repiten conmigo el ohm. Así que yo voy primero y después me copian los otros 3. El ohm es el sonido primordial del universo y funciona en 3 capas. La capa donde estamos despiertos, la capa donde estamos dormidos y la capa del inconsciente. Y cambia las energías, tanto del cuerpo como de la conciencia. Entonces yo lo que le voy a pedir es que cambiemos la energía del lugar, de nuestros cuerpos y de nuestra conciencia. Voy con el primero. Ahora van a repetir conmigo unos 3 ohms cada uno. Concéntrense. Pueden dejar los teléfonos y concentrarse en su cuerpo. ¿Sienten el cambio? Bueno, ese soy yo. Van a ver una serie de dibujos hechos con AI, obviamente. A mí me pregunta qué hago y yo me estoy definiendo como un wayfinder. Es aquella persona que trata de encontrar dónde están las energías de renovación en el universo. Sí, sí, es el de abajo, pero... A ver. No. Estamos con un pequeño problema técnico. Bien. ¿Soy yo? ¿O es la pila? Ahí está. Está medio flojo, ¿no? ¿Quieres cambiarla? ¿Cómo? Sí, ya sé. El de abajo no está andando. Bueno, vamos a ver si anda. Este soy yo en 1990. MBA de Harvard, tiradores de osos y toros, trabajando en Wall Street. Me creía el dueño del mundo y de hecho lo éramos. Éramos los dueños del mundo. Entonces lo que me gustaría compartir con ustedes es una historia de vida en las finanzas, pero sobre todo una historia de cómo aquello que las finanzas esconden han creado procesos que han creado las estructuras que degradan los ecosistemas sociales y naturales del mundo hoy. Bien. Seguimos con un pequeño problema técnico. Bien. Lo que vamos a ver hoy es una transición desde un paradigma antiguo que yo representé en una época. Cuando decido salir de vicepresidente de Citicorp Venture Capital en Nueva York y armo mi propio fondo, el primer inversor fue el Goldman Sachs Partners Fund. Esos son los socios de Goldman, es la plata de Goldman Sachs. Si yo tuviera que describir una imagen de mí en esa época, ustedes la están viendo hacia la izquierda. Y lo que me gustaría describir hoy es los distintos pasos que yo fui descubriendo para llegar a la imagen de la derecha. ¿Cuál es el puente que es posible construir hoy entre dos paradigmas? De un paradigma extractivo a un paradigma vivo. Aquellos que quieren tomar notas, voy a compartir esto con ustedes, así que... Bien, siguiente. Entonces, nosotros lo que tenemos que entender es la arquitectura que existe detrás de las cifras de las finanzas. ¿Cuál es la estructura que se ha creado? ¿Qué es lo que necesitamos entender para construir una visión verdadera? Y eso exige entender desde una honestidad moral, filosófica y política estas estructuras que hoy constituyen este mundo de degradación. La degeneración es un proceso, la regeneración también es un proceso. Entonces, yo le voy a invitar hoy a que tengamos el coraje de imaginar un mundo regenerativo. Bien. El mejor mapa que existe es de un amigo y socio mío. Bill Reed es socio en Seva. Bill Reed fue el creador del concepto LEED, las métricas que hoy cualquier proyecto urbanístico y arquitectónico utiliza para certificarse sustentablemente. Lo que Bill creó es este mapa de 5 paradigmas. Y estos 5 paradigmas se aplican no solamente a modelos económicos, sino a modelos sociales, culturales y ecológicos. Y si uno entiende en qué paradigma está parado, en qué paradigma se despierta cada mañana, porque estos 5 paradigmas nosotros los habitamos constantemente en cada una de las acciones que tomamos. Próxima. A ese cuadro fue... Estoy pidiendo pasar al próximo. Ese cuadro, no, el anterior. Ahí está. Ese cuadro fue mejorado por Carol Sanford, que describe 4 paradigmas: extraer valor, reducir daño, hacer el bien y el evolucionar el potencial inherente. Y quiero detenerme en esa frase, porque cada uno de nosotros tenemos que evolucionar nuestro potencial inherente. Los cambios que se necesitan en el mundo en este momento son cambios sociales y culturales dramáticos que tienen que venir de una conjunción de acciones de individuos que están dispuestos a cruzar esa cosmovisión. ¿Dónde está? Ahí está. Entonces, definamos lo que es un paradigma. Un paradigma es una serie de creencias y valores que tenemos nosotros, corporizadas, racionalizadas, que nos permiten ver el mundo de una determinada manera. Voy a dar un ejemplo muy simple. Mi mujer tiene un auto Honda y solo lo lleva a taller Honda, si bien yo tengo un amigo que tiene un taller que es mucho mejor mecánico, pero no hay manera de cambiarle la cabeza a esa conceptualización que ella tiene, que el taller Honda es lo mejor del mundo. Paradigma muy simple. Y nosotros estamos llenos de paradigmas y distintas creencias. Próximo. Bien. Entonces, en este mapa de Bill Reed y Carol Sanford, Nosotros el problema que estamos encontrando para pasear por ese mapa de posibilidades es la diferencia de creencias y paradigmas. Y esa foto que yo mostré a la izquierda, con tiradores y con creencias, tenía una concepción del mundo que era extractiva, competitiva y de creación y concentración de poder. Próximo. ¿Hay alguna forma que yo no pueda decir próximo en cada slide? Bien. Entonces, lo podemos ver de una manera distinta. Cuando nosotros estamos recaudando fondos, estamos vendiendo un proyecto, quizás estamos explicando un círculo a una persona que lo ve cuadrado. Y eso, no hay posibilidad de encontrar ese lenguaje a no ser que nosotros hagamos una retracción, un zoom out, para encontrar una manera de hacer un puente. Próximo. Bien. Entonces, existe una manera de crear esos puentes entre paradigmas. Fíjense que no existía ni el círculo ni el cuadrado. Había una representación que nos permitía generar puentes entre esas dos diferencias. Próximo. Bien. Laura, vos a hablar un poco de los tres horizontes. Voy a ser muy breve. Lo describo. Los tres horizontes es un framework de Bill Sharp que nos permite hacer un zoom para entender los procesos que están ocurriendo. El horizonte 1 es business as usual. Bien. El horizonte 1 es business as usual. El mundo como lo conocemos es un paradigma de creencias y valores que hoy está obviamente colapso. El horizonte 2 son todas las disrupciones que permiten que surja un nuevo paradigma, el horizonte 3. Un horizonte 2 podría ser la guerra en Irak, podría ser la guerra en Ucrania, Trump, inteligencia artificial. Son disrupciones que están ocurriendo. Bien. Entonces, hay hoy entre el horizonte 1 y el horizonte 3 una diferencia muy grande de paradigmas. Y me parece que el horizonte 2, ese plano de conciencia que está emergiendo, puede ser el que posibilite la creación de ese puente. Porque los que están en el horizonte 1 están diciendo cuadrados, cuadrados, cuadrados. Los del horizonte 3 hoy son un poco más inteligentes y están diciendo que el círculo es una evolución de los cuadrados y que existe la posibilidad de crear ecosistemas entre cuadrados y círculos. Bien. Esta es lo que yo considero mi evolución en los últimos 25 años y quisiera contarles una serie de historias de cuáles son las herramientas que existen hoy. No, perdón. Primero le voy a contar la historia de cómo las finanzas llegó a ser las finanzas hoy, ¿sí? Y eso empieza con una historia de Bernard Lietaer que se llama El 11º redondel. Había una vez un pueblo con mucha paz, donde había trueque, donde había comunidad, donde había cooperación. Y la moneda que utilizaban para el trueque era una gallina. Y si uno iba al mercado al mediodía con una gallina, por ahí podía volver con 2 panes, con una pata de cerdo o con alguna herramienta. Tan es así que un día llega al pueblo un hombre de un sombrero blanco y zapatos brillosos, y ve a una persona, una mujer, corriendo una gallina y dice, pobre gente. Y la mujer le dice, ¿tú puedes correr más rápido? ¿Tú puedes agarrar la gallina? Y dice, no, yo puedo hacer algo mucho mejor. Pídele a todo el pueblo que venga a la colina, abajo de ese árbol, traigan un par de tijeras y un cuero de vaca. Y él lo que hace es corta una serie de redondeles, le pone un sello, y le da a cada familia 10 redondeles. Y dice, cada redondel es el valor de una gallina. Ahora no van a tener que correr gallinas. Ahora pueden ir y hacer trueque con estos redondeles. El pueblo quedó fascinado. No tenían que correr más atrás de gallinas. Hasta que en un momento, él le dice, a cambio de esto, cuando yo vuelva el año que viene, ustedes me van a tener que devolver 11 redondeles. Y uno le pregunta, ¿y de dónde va a salir el 11º redondel? Ya verán. Se va el señor, y si la economía seguía igual, una de cada 11 familias iba a quebrar porque no iba a conseguir ese redondel. Entonces, lo que sucede en ese pueblo es primero la competencia. Históricamente, cuando venía una tormenta, las familias salían a recoger el trigo de alguien o los ayudaban a poner sus animales dentro o bajo techo. Eso dejó de ocurrir. Había una competencia por ese 11º redondel. Y después la acumulación. Algunas familias preferían tener más de 11 redondeles, 20 redondeles. Y la desigualdad. Había familias que iban a perder todo. Entonces, en ese pueblo ocurrieron 3 cosas: la quiebra, la expansión monetaria o la redistribución conflictiva, la inequidad. Y la única solución posible fue la de, el crecimiento constante. Empezaba a haber más gallinas y más gallinas, expansiones a otros pueblos, los efluentes de las gallinas empezaron a polucionar, y esto creó una desigualdad absoluta a partir de la creación del interés y el dinero en un pueblo. Y esto existe hoy. Si ustedes van, pero sigue fallando, pero funciona. Si ustedes, con delay, a veces funciona. Ahí está. Si ustedes van al Banco de Inglaterra o al Deutsche Bundesbank, ahí claramente dice que el dinero, que cada vez que un banco hace un préstamo, se crea dinero nuevo. Esa es la forma que nosotros logramos para crear dinero. Y esto lo dicen 2 bancos centrales. Y esto ocurrió en 1910 en Jekyll Island, donde 7 poderosos americanos, entre ellos había uno europeo, decidieron crear un sistema monetario donde los bancos podían tener la libertad de crear su propio dinero. Entonces, a partir de una crisis de 1907, donde hubo un cuestionamiento del sistema monetario y la fragilidad del sistema monetario, sale la ley de la Reserva Federal que se fue creada en Jekyll Island, donde la Reserva Federal, si bien es pública, está controlada por bancos privados. Entonces, veamos cómo funciona este ejemplo. Lo que lograron ellos es crear el poder para crear legítimamente el dinero, controlar el crédito. Y esto en la práctica funciona así. Esto es una abstracción, no es una realidad, pero para mostrarlo, si una persona deposita $1.000 en un banco, ese banco, acá creo que en Colombia tienen un 8% de ¿cómo se llama? Sí. Puede prestar hasta el 92% de esa plata. Asumamos que esa persona decide depositarlo de nuevo. Con $1.000 depositados en un banco, ese banco puede crear hasta $12.500 de dinero nuevo a partir de un 8% de encaje. Esto es lo que está ocurriendo. Y esto, lo que está ocurriendo, está generando lo que ocurrió en ese pequeño pueblo, donde aparece la inequidad, la competencia y la necesidad de crecimiento absoluto. Porque ese dinero que está creado, en realidad es impagable. El hecho de crear interés compuesto hace que ese dinero sea impagable. Si nosotros miramos la cantidad de deuda que existe en el mundo con 100 trillones de Producto Bruto, hoy la cantidad de deuda cuadriplica eso. No lo vamos a poder pagar ni nuestra generación ni las próximas generaciones. Estamos viviendo a partir de generar dinero y deuda de nuestras futuras generaciones y aparte de las externalidades sociales y naturales que estamos creando. Bien, entonces necesitamos construir ese puente entre distintas cosmovisiones. Perdón, voy a buscar mi agua que me la olvidé acá. Gracias. Si ustedes miran ese mapa de Bill Reed, yo lo que he hecho es tratar de crear un arquetipo para cada uno de esos paradigmas. Entonces, tenemos el paradigma del extractor que busca el control, ciego a cualquier concepto. Él lo que busca es resultados de corto plazo. El optimizador, que tiene cierto cargo de culpa y es consciente de su reputación y trata de optimizarlo, pero dentro del paradigma extractivo. El sostenedor, que en realidad lo que está tratando de sostener es el paradigma actual. Hoy la sustentabilidad la podríamos definir como aquel sistema económico que sustenta el actual modelo. Según Bill Reed, es a slow way of dying. El restaurador, que tiene mayor conciencia, que trata de buscar un equilibrio. Y finalmente el regenerador, que entiende los ecosistemas vivos como tales y busca generar la regeneración de esos ecosistemas vivos. Y en ese sentido, y esto lo digo muy humildemente, ¿y quién aquí es o conoce todo el concepto de empresas B? Bien, casi todos. Bien. Yo esto lo digo con mucha humildad. Mi empresa salió 2 años seguidos top 10 en la categoría Changemakers de empresas B en el mundo, 2017 y 2018. Yo creo que en ese puente el sistema B se queda corto. Está dentro del paradigma actual, todavía dentro del paradigma de crecimiento. Si bien Natura y Danone han hecho avances muy interesantes en temas de sustentabilidad, también se quedan del otro lado del puente. Y me parece que lo interesante es que ya existen las estructuras y quizás todos los que estamos aquí estamos construyendo esas estructuras para que ese puente entre el horizonte 1 y el horizonte 3 sea posible en el plazo más corto posible. Yo estoy convencido que ese puente existe. Ese puente somos nosotros. Emerge hoy una cosmovisión, una conciencia nueva en el mundo, no solo atrás del concepto de regeneración, atrás de todas las posibilidades y todos los esfuerzos individuales que cada uno de nosotros aquí estamos manifestando al universo. Bien, ¿por qué existe ese puente? Y voy a contar 3 historias y un concepto. La primera historia es esta señora, Elinor Ostrom, 1910, no siendo economista, ganó el premio Nobel de Economía, porque resolvió algo bastante complejo que es la tragedia de los comunes. Cada sistema compartido en el mundo donde los intereses son individuales y el costo se distribuye, se degrada. Eso pasa en áreas de pesca, áreas de irrigación, los océanos, el Amazonas, nuestro planeta. Y ella, a partir de una serie de estudios que hizo, alrededor de 200 estudios, logró crear un sistema de gobernanza para recursos comunes. A mí me pasa un milagro. Yo en el año 2010, en Estocolmo, me siento para un viaje de 4 horas en tren y adivinen quién se sienta al lado mío para un viaje de 4 horas, Elinor Ostrom. Y ahí compartimos una relación, ella se murió en 2012, pero me permitió entender en ese momento cuáles son los principios que, estoy traduciendo, como pool resources, recursos comunes, utilizaban para ser sustentables, donde las comunidades locales priorizaban el bienestar del recurso sobre sus intereses individuales, porque entendían que a medida que crecía el valor de ese recurso, su bienestar crecía. No de una manera desequilibrada, sino de una manera equitativa. Entonces, no voy a entrar, esto sería 1 hora de charla, explicar los principios de Elinor Ostrom, pero como concepto existe y está demostrado que hay sistemas policéntricos de gobernanza que priorizan los recursos. Y esto se puede aplicar a cualquier ecosistema. De hecho, el ejemplo que más me gusta, porque existe leyes que fueron escritas en 1714 en este pueblo de Torbel, donde administraban el ganado de verano para sustentar los recursos de invierno. O sea, en el verano podrían poner cantidad enorme de vacas, pero en invierno eso estaba más limitado. Entonces escribieron una serie de principios que aún persisten, que fue los que el Irorostrom, entre varios, descubrió, para generar la gobernanza policéntrica o descentralizada de recursos comunes. Y acá entra un concepto muy interesante. Elinor no usaba la palabra commoners. Es una palabra que creo que acuñó David Bollier. Commoning es un verbo, es una acción. Y todos los participantes del ecosistema son commoners. Lo que está faltando acá es entender cómo las finanzas se pueden convertir en un commoner, cómo las finanzas pueden estar al servicio de un ecosistema sin extraer de ese ecosistema. Esto es lo que vamos a ver a continuación. Silvio Gesell fue un austríaco argentino. De hecho, en Argentina tenemos una playa muy linda que se llama Villa Gesell, que fue un comerciante, y él lo que descubrió es que el pan, los animales, todas las cosas físicas, todos los bienes físicos se descomponían con el tiempo. Pero el dinero no. Aquel que acumulaba dinero, acumulaba poder y valor. Y a él se le ocurrió crear algo que se llama Free Money, que fue implementado en Wörgl, en Austria, en 1932. Él ya había muerto, pero el intendente de Wörgl, que se llama Michael Unterberger, un nombre muy complicado, y no quiero aventurarme si hay algún alemán acá que me puede ayudar a decir cómo se dice certificados de trabajo en alemán, por favor. A ver. Bien. Este intendente lo que hizo es tomó el concepto de free money de Silvio Gesell y creó una moneda que se degradaba con el tiempo. Cada mes esa moneda local tenía que recibir una estampilla. Si lo ven ahí en la original, lo voy a mostrar más adelante, cada mes hay una estampilla. Si no le ponían esa estampilla, la moneda se degradaba. Entonces lo que generó es una enorme cantidad de circulación de esa moneda. Y los números son increíbles. Aumentó un 25% el comercio local. Esto era un pueblo que estaba en un momento de gran depresión, ¿no? Con un 30% de desempleo. El desempleo bajó el 8%. El dinero empieza a circular y generó lo que se llama el milagro de Wörgl. Lo que sucedió en Austria en ese momento es que 200 pueblos quisieron implementar esta estrategia y el Banco Central de Austria prohibió cualquier dinero local, porque sacaba el poder de esa posibilidad de los bancos centrales de imprimir dinero y generar, digamos, esa concentración de poder que la impresión del dinero logra. Este es uno de los certificados, hay muy pocas fotos, pero fíjese que cada mes ese certificado fue presentado para recibir una estampilla. ¿Me puedes ayudar con este nombre? Pero creo que es Kim Gauer. Bien, esta moneda existe hoy. Es un espacio donde es una moneda local, donde uno va, cambia un euro por un Kim Gauer y genera una enorme cantidad de circulación local. Y si uno quiere volver al euro, pierde un 5%. Y además esa moneda se va degradando con el tiempo, con lo cual lo que incentiva, igual que el dinero de Wörgl, es que la gente circule rápidamente ese dinero. Bien. No voy a entrar mucho en detalle de esto, pero estos son los 7 principios de diseño regenerativo creados por Bill Reed y Carlos Sanford. Hay una nota muy interesante en Medium de Daniel Christian Wall y Bill Reed conversando sobre esto. Pero yo creo que el más interesante de estos, y voy a mencionar 2, son la integralidad, que en inglés se llama wholeness, para diseñar por la integralidad. La regeneración lo que tiene que regenerar son ecosistemas que sean vitales, evolutivos y que tengan desarrollo potencial. Y eso lo hace a partir de uno de los principios, que es la esencia, que no es el más importante, pero es, como su nombre lo indica, esencial. Bill Reed dice, "What does this place want to become?" Y eso lleva a esta evolución de la dimensión de la regeneración a el concepto de place-based. Lo que estamos viendo hoy en el descubrimiento de capitales para ser invertidos es cuál es el lugar y cuál es la esencia y el potencial del lugar. Y ahí sale el concepto de inversiones bioregionales y el concepto que vamos a ver a continuación de Bioregional Financing Facilities. Entonces, a partir de esa esencia, todos los otros principios se ponen en juego. La reciprocidad, el potencial que tiene ese lugar, el potencial de desarrollo que tiene ese lugar, cómo está anidado en otros sistemas y cómo funciona como un nodo y cuál es la reciprocidad que hacen en su conjunto por la integralidad de ese ecosistema generar procesos regenerativos. Entonces, las estructuras de diseño regenerativo ya existen. Lo que nosotros estamos viendo es un sistema que fue muy inteligentemente diseñado para centralizar el poder en pocos nodos y trasladar el costo tanto social y natural fuera de esos nodos. El problema es que hemos llegado a los límites planetarios y esos límites planetarios no solamente son naturales, no son solamente naturales, son también sociales. Bien, me pasé. Entonces, voy a entrar ahora en ese puente en 2 conceptos que se llaman capital sistémico y capital vivo. Algunos de nosotros estuvimos 3 semanas atrás, y la miro a Eugenia, en Systemic Investment Summit en Río de Janeiro. Si hubo alguien más ahí, que levante la mano. Para mí fue un antes y un después en el lenguaje. Systemic Investment Summit, capital sistémico. Y el concepto de capital sistémico me parece que debería, si no está tomando hoy, alinearse con los conceptos de gobernanza de Elinor Ostrom, porque un sistema tiene que tener ciertos principios de gobernanza de recursos. Empezar a pensar cuál es ese dinero local y regional que hace que circule esa energía en bien de ese ecosistema bioregional. En la orquesta de todos esos principios de diseño regenerativo, para que ese sistema pueda evolucionar, estamos hablando que la regeneración es un proceso, pero ese proceso tiene que estar alineado con los patrones y principios de los sistemas vivos. Cualquier proceso que se llame regenerativo, que no esté alineado con ese diseño regenerativo, que en el fondo de su ADN es comprender cómo funcionan los patrones y principios de los diseños regenerativos, no va a funcionar. porque ese capital sistémico tiene que estar al servicio de la vida. La regeneración es un proceso de vida, de regeneración de vida. Entonces vuelvo a este paradigma, ¿no? Donde estamos parados hoy, donde todos hacemos budgets, forecasting, todo es lineal, causa y efecto. La mayoría de los proyectos son cortoplacistas. En el panel anterior estábamos hablando de 12 años es mucho, 8 años es lo que se está viendo, también es mucho. Lo que tratamos de entender es cuáles son los escenarios posibles de probabilidad. En cambio, desde el pensamiento sistémico, lo que estamos entendiendo es, primero, que el mundo es extremadamente complejo, que estamos en una era de exponencialidad, que ese horizonte 2 está generando disrupciones radicales en todos los frentes. Y tenemos que generar ecosistemas adaptables y resilientes. Adaptables y resilientes a todos esos futuros plausibles. No hay un horizonte 3. Acá Stuart Kaufman habla del adyacente posible, que es la multiplicidad de posibilidades y opcionalidades que tenemos en este momento, que son infinitas y dependen quizás de una pequeña chispa en ese horizonte 2, cómo el futuro del mundo se desencadena en esta próxima década. Geopolítica, un estrecho de Hormuz que no se abre, inteligencia artificial, volatilidad climática, los 4 grados de temperatura que mostraba Edward Müller hoy sobre el Pacífico. Y el gran problema, y esto yo lo siento muchísimo, porque yo puedo ponerme los tiradores, un traje Armani, una corbata Hermès de poder y sentarme en un boardroom de cualquier banco de inversión y convertirme nuevamente en uno de ellos, es la imposibilidad de aceptación de cruzar ese umbral, porque ellos necesitan defender su identidad. Yo creo que el problema más grande que tenemos es cómo desmoneramos un paradigma de creencias para que ese capital que tiene que fluir hacia todos los proyectos que nosotros estamos activando acá fluya, pero que aquellos que retienen el poder hoy puedan abrirse a eso. Hablé bastante de esto, la diferencia entre capital extractivo y capital regenerativo. Lo dejo para que lo miren, son una serie de definiciones. Yo lo que diría es que el capital regenerativo lo que busca es activar procesos de vida. Lo definiría así. Y me gustaría moverme a 2 conceptos. No sé cómo estamos de tiempo, cortos, ¿no, Laura? Bien, perfecto. Yo creo que la mayor disrupción que hemos visto en las finanzas ahora son estos Bioregional Financial Facilities de Samantha Power y otros, no los voy a nombrar, ¿no? Que lo que están entendiendo es la necesidad de invertir en ecosistemas, pero desde una mentalidad sistémica. No están viendo un bosque como una suma de árboles, están viendo el bosque. Y esto me parece que como lenguaje financiero es extremadamente disruptivo. Y yo muy tarde anoche, estos eran los últimos slides y empecé a pensar, digamos, no los pude incluir, pero voy a tratar de decirlo en los 3 minutos que me quedan. El capital no es riqueza. En español es bastante difícil definir wealth and richness. Lo que es wealth es emergente. Richness, como lo vemos, es extractivo. Pero lo que nosotros necesitamos es crear systemic wealth, y el capital sistémico hace eso. Pasa de la extracción a la nutrición. Y yo lo que quisiera agregar en este par de minutos que me queda es: el capital sistémico está muy bien, pero creo que se queda en la gramática del paradigma viejo. Porque si vemos todos los proyectos de BFFs, Bioregional Financial Facilities, hablan con el concepto de riesgo, exit, todo ese lenguaje financiero que aquellos que estamos al servicio de la vida encontramos que todavía es un poquito limitante. Y me parece que el capital vivo lo que está diseñando es las finanzas como un nuevo proceso de diseño civilizatorio. Me parece que el capital sistémico se está quedando corto en el hecho que si nosotros no incluimos en nuestra fórmula de inversión sistémica el hecho de cómo vamos a gobernar esas bioregiones, cómo vamos a crear concepto de commons, donde inevitablemente necesitamos crear un nuevo sistema monetario que esté al servicio de ese ecosistema. Yo a propósito le mostré ese dinero que tenía estampitas de hace casi 100 años. Imagínense hoy con inteligencia artificial y blockchain la capacidad que tenemos de crear sistemas de gobernanza para ecosistemas bioregionales que estén al servicio de la comunidad local y que la comunidad local esté al servicio de ese ecosistema, que haya un mutualismo simbiótico de coevolución entre las comunidades locales y esos recursos. Porque esos proyectos, si hablábamos en la mesa hoy definiendo qué es una bioregión, si es un río, si es un wetland, si es un estado, esas bioregiones existen. De hecho, Joe Brewer acá en Colombia con Barichara están arbolando la bandera de conceptos bioregionales. Y me parece que cualquier proyecto tiene que pensarse como una semilla. Esa semilla puede caer en tierra que no es fértil, o puede caer en una tierra o en un momento, en una estación del año donde no puede germinar, o por ahí su poder germinativo está lento. Pero piensen la intención que tiene esa semilla. Esa semilla quiere ser primero un árbol, luego crear un ecosistema de sombra, de refugio, de espacio para micelios, de conectarse con otros árboles, de expandir sus semillas, de convertirse en un bosque. Piensen eso como su proyecto. Nosotros somos hoy semillas y quizás el lugar que caímos no es muy fértil hoy. Quizás la primavera le falta un poco, pero quizás venga una lluvia, quizás un pájaro nos lleve a otro lugar y podamos crear esos ecosistemas interconectados. Y ahí es donde el capital tiene que convertirse en un nutriente. El capital tiene que ser el sol, tiene que ser el agua, tiene que ser el fósforo, tiene que ser el nitrógeno para ese ecosistema. Y eso es lo que lo desafío a pensar, cómo imaginamos ese capital al servicio de nuestras semillas. Porque nosotros lo que estamos creando ese árbol, que finalmente en esta red de micelios vamos a estar todos interconectados. Los desafíos que tenemos por delante no los vamos a resolver solos. Se hablaba hoy hace un rato a partir de eso, de la creación de una red de micelios. Cómo todos empezamos a convertir, cómo empezamos a desvanecer un poco nuestro ego. Mañana con Bernardo vamos a hablar un poco de eso. Cómo desmantelamos nuestro ego para crear esa red de micelios. Laura, vos me pediste este slide. ¿Querés que...? Bien. Es muy complejo, pero voy a tratar de... Y si querés lo hablamos juntos. Del otro lado del puente, donde están esas finanzas, cuando uno habla de regeneración, cuando uno habla de capital vivo, generalmente en el boardroom la gente se levanta y se va. O sea, por ahí tiene un interés inicial. Hoy lo que está surgiendo como concepto es el concepto del land banking. Cualquier portfolio manager hoy en el mundo, cuando mira su portfolio, no sabe dónde invertir. De hecho, Warren Buffett es la primera vez en su historia que tiene 380 billones de dólares en cash en una moneda que está discutiendo su fragilidad, si va a seguir siendo petrodólar o si va a pasar a un Pt.1. Entonces hoy no hay muchos activos en el mundo donde uno pueda invertir. Entonces pongamos el concepto de land banking en un placeholder. Nosotros en Seva lo que hemos creado es un sistema para medir la vitalidad, viabilidad y desarrollo potencial de un ecosistema. Lo que definimos es si ese ecosistema está vivo, si es adaptable, si es resiliente, si está en un proceso sintrópico y si está anidado en un espacio sintrópico o si está anidado en un espacio entrópico. Puede ser una isla de coherencia muy interesante, un área de conservación, pero si la región que lo rodea es entrópica, ese espacio finalmente se va a degradar. Entonces, existen hoy las tecnologías, y nosotros los últimos 3 años hemos investigado tecnologías de agroforestía sintrópica de la línea de Ernesto, de ganadería regenerativa de la línea de los Borelli, Pt.1, y hay ejemplos de transiciones de monocultura de maíz, de soja, de trigo, hacia procesos regenerativos. Entonces, el gran desafío que yo estoy planteando hoy, y quizás podamos discutirlo con Laura porque me interesa también su visión, hemos tenido unas conversaciones interesantes, es el concepto de land banking no es posicionarse en tierras, es posicionarse en tierras que tengan esa capacidad de vitalidad, viabilidad y desarrollo potencial sintrópico a procesos regenerativos. Brasil tiene 100 millones de hectáreas degradadas por la arquitectura. En Cali se comprometió para restaurar 12 millones de hectáreas para 2030. Nosotros tenemos que encontrar un modelo que si vamos a cumplir con esos acuerdos o vamos incluso a reducir el riesgo del threshold de los 7 límites planetarios, el que más se expandió es la pérdida de biodiversidad. En los últimos 50 años perdimos el 73% de toda la vida salvaje en el mundo y el 50% de toda la vida marítima. Nosotros no vamos a poder restaurar eso con un modelo de tipo Tompkins y Chris McDavid de conservación. Vamos a tener que hacerlo a través de procesos regenerativos de producción sintrópica, a través de ganadería regenerativa, a través de agrofloresta sintrópica y a través de reducir el impacto de fertilizantes y pesticidas y nitrógenos dependientes de combustibles fósiles de todas las monoculturas. Ese es nuestro gran desafío, porque si logramos crear un modelo donde el valor de la tierra no solamente es un resguardo de valor, sino que se incrementa porque la vida de ese ecosistema crece en resiliencia y adaptabilidad, ese es el modelo productivo que necesitamos tener. Este es el último. Necesitamos una nueva historia que ya existe y necesitamos el coraje para levantarnos y hacer florecer lo que ya sabemos que tenemos que hacer con las herramientas que tenemos y que existen. Termino ahí. Muchas gracias.